Hello, everybody, and welcome in to the MVP show for January 10th, 2021. And it's a historic day for a lot of reasons, and guessing from Dan's tie, you could probably guess why. But I am John Vicari alongside Dan Passante and Brennan Miller. And look, there's only one way to lead. There's a lot going on in the sports world. For the first time in a while, you pretty much have all three sports gearing up to be in action this week with the NHL starting. You still got college basketball, the NBA in full swing, as well, of course, the NFL playoffs. But where we start today is the Buffalo Bills, Dan's team, winning their first playoff game of his lifetime. The last playoff win for the Buffalo Bills, 1995, the specific date, December 30th. It was a 37-22 win over the Miami Dolphins. And Dan was -5 at that point. He has waited a long time, but yesterday he got it, a win in the playoffs versus the Colts. A game that I'm sure Dan will take us through wasn't maybe the easiest to watch, but the end result, something he didn't think he'd see, a Bills playoff win. Dan, your reaction to the Bills advancing to the divisional round of the NFL playoffs?
Few people are in a group chat with myself and a few other people we go to college with. And I think some of the words that I used during the defense in the second half was sad, pathetic, embarrassing. Just some of the words, because this team, they win. I don't even facts are really not the thing that are in my mind right now. But they make it to the playoffs. They're the 2 seed, and they almost lost in the first round. And I was going to be so upset if they did that, but they did not. Thank God for Josh Allen. He was so great yesterday, as he normally is. The play calling was not, but the Bills survive, move on to next week for the first time in 25 years. So I think I maybe have to open these today, right? I mean, I don't remember when I bought these. They expired a long time ago, but I have to eat them today. I think that makes the most sense for sure.
Yeah, and Dan, what's great about this, you could literally eat those, the whole box if you want. Not going to go after your consuming habits there, but you could eat the whole box and watch and wait for which team the Bills are going to play in the postseason. But you're in relax mode today, watching an NFL Sunday, which, I mean, Brennan is as well with his Packers, but not something that you usually could do in a playoff weekend, and you get to do that today. Couple questions. First, when Phillip Rivers, and I know it was, I think, at the 45-yard line, the Indy 45, when Phillip Rivers is reeling back to throw a Hail Mary, knowing what happened earlier in the season, really the only loss in the last, 11 games for the Bills being that Cardinals Hail Murray, they were calling it. What was your reaction when you were in that situation? Were you thinking the worst, or were you like, Rivers is going to reach because he throws the ball weird?
Complete and utter panic. Just absolute pandemonium. In my living room, I was like, this is going to happen again. Of course, it's going to happen to us, but Micah Hyde was ready for it. Thank God.
Yeah. Do you think
where you learned that, Dan? Green Bay, Micah Hyde.
Wow. That's where he learned to knock down a ball, not in high school or college in Green Bay.
Where you learned how to play safety, baby.
Dan, did yesterday's game, and I know it's a win, and you touched on the negatives in the beginning, does this sort of hinder in your mind the Bills' chances to make a run in the postseason? Or do you think, hey, every game that's going to happen this postseason for the Bills, it's probably going to be in close fashion and maybe not play down to their opponent, even though I think they did yesterday? But what are your feelings towards the Bills making a run?
Well, I'm happy that they won yesterday because they're still alive. And I'm happy that there's a good chance that they will probably play Pittsburgh, which we'll get to later in the show. Mm-hmm. And they've already beaten Pittsburgh by a lot. So I'm happy that they won't most likely have to play the Ravens or the Titans, because those two teams gave them issues earlier this year. I think, in the next game, the play calling can't be much worse, and they can't be that much less prepared just to deal with their plan of attack. I mean, the Colts did a great job keeping Josh Allen off the field. The defense was exhausted, and that gave them a lot of issues. So I feel like if they can call better plays next game, then they'll be all right. But there was a few times where, 3rd and 1, everyone in the entire stadium in Western New York knows we're going to hand it off to Devin Singletary, and they do, and they lose 3 yards. It's almost like the days of Trent Edwards and Drew Bledsoe, where you'd go back in the pocket and you say, "Oh, this smells like a 3-yard loss," and you know it's going to happen. But those days are over now, thank God. Yeah, I feel like that they can't do much worse with the play calling, is what I would say.
Another question with the final minutes of the game, because I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't, fathom what his reaction is. When I think there was like a minute to go, there was pretty much a fumble forced by the Bills in which they marked after review that he was down, the receiver who fumbled. And obviously, it was one of many missed calls in all 3 games yesterday, which we, might get to today. But what was your reaction when that happened? Do you think this was the first step in a spiral towards a loss, or were you cool, calm, and collected?
Well, I was like, it looks like a fumble because everyone, well, not everyone, but most people agree that it was. He got up and made himself a runner again. That was just another like complete panic moment, I think, for everybody. Like as soon as they don't get the fumble, it's a serious issue. I can't say there was too much confidence going on as the game headed towards an end because we were going back to needing the defense, and wasn't great yesterday, but somehow got the job done.
Yeah, and I think a testament to that is pretty much the fans too. For the first time, they were at what is now as Bills Stadium before they changed the name, I guess, going into next year with the name changes, but at Bills Stadium. And Coach Sean McDermott said it sounded like it was full only in Buffalo, which I think was a great quote because they were loud yesterday. And to, I think, everyone here's delight, on Twitter, there was but there was a good amount of tailgating, I guess, away from the stadium, and enough, in my opinion, Bills fans that went through tables for my liking. So I was happy about that.
That was incredible. I mean, that you gotta have it. You gotta have it. It's a Bills win. Everyone goes to the table for sure.
And one guy on fire, by the way, which you could probably check on Twitter after our show, but definitely an eventful Bills win. Brennan, any thoughts before we move to our next segment just on this Bills win? Historic. Feeling good for Dan. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll throw in, I don't know. I think the games yesterday, the slate wasn't the best. I mean, the Rams-Seahawks game in general was a terrible football game to watch. Neither team was very good yesterday, which bodes well for my Packers next week because they'll either have to play the Rams or the Bears, the Chicago Bears. That being said, I think they should have flipped the slate yesterday because I think that the Bills game was the best game that was played. And it didn't really feel, I mean, maybe it's on me. Maybe I'm just not in the right mindset at this point because it was the first playoff game, but it didn't really feel like a playoff game. Like, yes, the stadium had people in it. It was loud, and Phillip Rivers had to yell to his players to be able to call audibles and be able to, make sure that the play was known by his offense. But I guess maybe it's on me, but it because it was, I guess, in the daylight, it didn't feel like as intense as it probably could have. That and the fact that the Bills went in as the 2 seed and were supposed to, be able to handle the Colts pretty easily. In theory, I guess that's on me, but it's going to be exciting to see what the Bills do the rest of the playoffs because I don't know if I've seen any other Super Bowl predictions other than Bills Packers. Which, if the Super Bowl is Bills Packers, oh man, our apartment is going to be absolutely insane once we get back to Ithaca.
Yeah, this show is going to be great. Watching the Super Bowl, I think it'd be the first time, at least for me, watching a Super Bowl where if it were to happen, obviously, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but where there's representatives for both teams who are actually fans, not just, have an interest other than fandom for that game. So definitely going to be interesting as we go through these playoffs. Another note for this game, one final note, Phillip Rivers 0-4 in playoff games where it was not minus 40, but under, I should say, 40 degrees. Weird stat that I find hilarious. Poor guy can never win a playoff game. It'll be interesting to see his future, where he goes in terms of maybe retirement, to the broadcast booth with retirement, or to another team. A lot of people are saying that he will not return to Indianapolis and they will either go with Brissett or think a youth quarterback or maybe even a trade for Deshaun Watson. I wouldn't think that just because it's in division, but you never know with the NFL these days in terms of Rivers' future. But I think an interesting story. And again, as Brennan mentioned, the Colts as a 7 seed, the last team to get in the AFC, played very, very well against the Bills in Buffalo in front of a crowd, which was, again, the first time that this happened this season. So now we'll transition into, I think, the biggest trade of the week and the biggest trade of the Major League Baseball offseason. It has to do with the New York Mets. And for weeks on this show, when we talked about baseball, we talked about when Steve Cohen, the new owner of the Mets, would flex his spending muscle. And the Mets organization, Jared Porter, they brought in as the general manager, and Sandy Alderson. They executed a trade this week. And some people are saying it's the biggest trade in Mets history since they got Mike Piazza. We have to see on that if it's going to, the same success that Piazza had as a Met that Lindor will have, as well as Carrasco. But a huge trade that brings, as I mentioned, Francisco Lindor, all-star shortstop, to the Mets, as well as Carlos Carrasco, who's going to add to their rotation. And the Mets only gave up about 4 players. Their starting shortstop, Ahmed Rosario, one of their best prospects in Andres Jimenez, who's also a shortstop. So the Indians at least now have a starter and a backup, but again, gave away their all-star. And then two prospects, reliever Josh Wolf, and looking for the other name here, Isaiah Green, an outfielder. And both of those prospects now in the teens in terms of the Indians prospect pool. So they're adding some farm depth. And this trade was, for the most part, not for the most part, I guess, but universally praised by all. A lot of people thought the Mets won this trade just in terms of sheer not giving up a lot. When people first looked at this trade, because it was rumored that Lindor might come to the Mets, they thought that the asking price in terms of prospects was going to be bigger, that it was going to be multiple top-notch Mets prospects. Maybe it was going to be a piece in their bullpen. None of that happened. And I know Brennan will give his perspective and maybe take down Mets fans a peg or two looking at this trade. But how you look at it right now, and I know Mets fans have been burnt, especially in this decade, by trades for top-notch players that didn't live up to it. This was a steal of a deal by the Mets. It was a great trade. Francisco Lindor is only 27 years old, and maybe going into the prime of his career, he did have the worst season of his career in the 60-game season last year, but a career 285 hitter, a Gold Glove at shortstop, and he brings a leadership component to this team and someone at the top of the lineup who's going to play game in and game out. Even in last season, in which the Indians were not in it, Lindor suited up for all 60 games. And I think that's something that the Mets need. It's a help to their culture that's been fostering for the last couple of years. And the forgotten piece of this is Carlos Carrasco. I understand he's 34 years old, and when the current deal that he's on expires, he'll be 38. But last year, and again, I know a 60-game season, he had a career year in terms of ERA. A couple years ago, he was an 18-game winner, and he doesn't need to be an ace here in New York. They have DeGrom. They have Syndergaard when he comes back from Tommy John surgery. They have, to a lesser extent, Marcus Stroman and Steven Matz. And my favorite Mets pitcher, by the way, even though I'm a Yankees fan, David Peterson. The fact that that guy is there with those arms just, I find funny. But that's a side note. But Carlos Carrasco will either be the 2 or 3 opening day, and it's going to be huge for the Mets. He is a great starter, and I understand the age, but, this past season he was very good, and for the Indians for a while, and another loaded staff as well, where he didn't have to be the ace either, he flourished in that system. So there's no reason to think that when he comes to the Mets, he won't add to their already great arms, and so I think all around it was a great move by the Mets. The prospects, we only know so much about them. Some people didn't like to give up Andres Jimenez, but he's a shortstop. So if you're going to bring in Francisco Lindor, you would have traded Jimenez down the line anyway, because Lindor is your shortstop for the future probably. Lindor's in the last year of his deal, making $19.5 million this year, but Steve Cohen and the big money he has are expected to sign Lindor after this offseason, and maybe even before. Maybe they extend the contract this season. Well, that's remained to be seen, but in terms of this trade, I think it was an overall win by the Mets. Brennan, maybe you have a differing perspective or want people to relax out there in Mets fandom.
Right. So I want to talk about the biggest acquisition that happened this offseason, a guy who's really going to make a difference for his team, and that's Kyle Schwarber to the Nats on a 1-year deal. No, I mean, okay. You take a look at this trade. Yes, the Mets got better, absolutely, and that's what you love to see. Obviously, they have to have some kind of confidence that they're going to be able to re-sign Lindor because he's in the last year of his deal, and you don't make a trade like that. You don't give up 2 prospects, guys that are going to end up in the teams of the organization you're trading with, if you don't feel like you can get back a guy who's going to be on your team for quite a while. So I think the Mets have confidence in their ability to re-sign Lindor. He's not a rent a player. If he was, they would have waited till halfway through the season when the Indians were looking to ship out if they weren't in playoff contention, which in the AL Central, you never know. It could be anyone. It could be the Twins, could be the White Sox. Who knows who would be leading that division in the middle of the season at this point. So the Mets are confident in that. But how sad are the Cleveland Indians at this point? I saw a tweet a few days ago. The fact that the 2016 Indians, the Indians that went to the World Series, there is one player on that team one starter who is still on that roster. Everyone else has either retired, been cut, or been traded. That player, obviously, Jose Ramirez, the guy who, was in contention for the MVP last year. But at this point, you can't keep people around like that. I feel bad for Cleveland isn't really a small market anyway, but I feel bad for teams that are in smaller markets in baseball because you can't afford to keep these guys around. Another tweet that I saw, sorry, my dog is freaking out over here. Another tweet I saw, the fact that Mike Trout is going to get paid the same amount as the entire Cleveland baseball team's roster this season. It's absolutely insane, the fact that they're not able to keep any stars in their roster, or on their roster, and they're not able to keep any real talent on the team. So I don't know. I get it. Like, yes, the Mets are going to be happy. They got better. Obviously, that is big in the NL East, because I think the Braves at this point are still the best team in the NL East. Washington is a team that you can't really throw away just because they won the World Series 2 years ago. You had a bad stretch in a 60-game season. That doesn't mean you're a bad team. I think the Nationals are still up there as well. The Marlins, who knows how good the Marlins are? You can't assume that they're good because they made the playoffs in a 60-game season. But who knows? I think the NL East is very competitive. It's important for the Mets to get better. They got better on Cleveland's side. Who knows? They got rid of one of their stars, and there's really no answer as far as when they're going to be a team that can compete in the American League again.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a really good trade for the Mets. I feel happy for that fan base. They've been through a lot, and they definitely deserve to have some happiness soon. But yeah, your point about the Cleveland is so true. That team is really going to struggle these next few years, and that's really sad to see. Another really passionate fan base that trading away Lindor like that is really tough for them. But yeah, I was going to say too that I'm happy that we did say that the trade was good. I'm not going to say that our role in the show is to take the Mets down with 2 Yankee fans. It's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that sometimes it happens. And today we did acknowledge that the Mets did something very good.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. I feel that's our show. We have our fandoms and maybe our biases, but we break down things, I think, the way we see them. And again, I like the perspective that we gave. And it's sad because, as Brennan mentioned, it's a team like the Mets, and I know, maybe Mets fans will take offense to this, but it's a team that is on the rise right now. But for, I guess 2014, 2015, until they got into these later years, they were what the Cleveland Baseball Club will be these next couple of years. And that's just a team that, makes bad trades, bad free agent acquisitions, not bad in theory, just bad in execution, and a team that's not looking to spend a lot. And that's the problem. I mean, if you look at Cleveland, and Brennan mentioned the great stat of who's left, people bought Lindor jerseys thinking he was the franchise piece for a while. Even, Carrasco, he was there a long time in Cleveland. I know, again, as we mentioned, a 34-year-old, so it's at maybe the end of his career, but a guy that maybe Indians fans thought would stay around for a while. And it's tough when Cleveland was so close to the pinnacle, 2016, making the World Series. In the last couple of years, not last year, but the last couple of years before that, making long playoff runs and not getting that World Series, and now really can't fathom getting into the playoffs for, maybe 2025 down the line. It's baseball, so, you never know the unpredictability of it, and they are getting, I think, a good shortstop in Amed Rosario, but nowhere close to what Francisco Lindor was for the Indians, and now will be for the New York Mets. So a great deal all around. Well, not all around, just for the Mets, honestly, and Cleveland probably going to be reeling after this deal. But Some good execution by the Mets. And hey, Steve Cohen, final thing on this, Steve Cohen has lived up to it so far, right? You can't knock him, and you can't say he didn't spend. If this move comes back to bite the Mets on the butt, hey, at the time, it was probably the best move you could have made, and I don't think it will come back to bite them, but, the Mets are the Mets. Well, now transition. Yeah. What was that, Brennan?
LeBron's next, right?
Oh, yeah. Jeez. By the way, a couple episodes back when Brennan goes on who they're going to get and he goes down, he just keeps getting more and more ludicrous. Very funny, but we'll now transition into tomorrow's football game, and that's the College Football Playoff National Championship game. To start, I think it's an accomplishment we're even here with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has just ravaged college football at times. There's inconsistency in terms of how many games teams have played all year, but they got a college football playoff, the Final Four. They played. It was the Rose Bowl at AT&T Stadium in Jerry's World, but it happened. And now a national championship and a game that even if it was a normal year, you could have predicted happening. Alabama and Ohio State, two powerhouse college football teams that have been for this past decade. You have Nick Saban looking for his 7th national championship all time, which if he does win, will pass Bear Bryant in terms of the most championships, won by a coach all time in college football. So a lot for stakes for him. And you have on the other side in terms of coaching, Ryan Day of Ohio State, and a relatively young coach in his 40s looking to be the second youngest coach in college football history to win a national championship game. So a lot up for grabs. This game, like I said, with this season with COVID, there was some COVID scares earlier on, but it will happen tomorrow night, 8 p.m. ESPN at Hard Rock Stadium. And there's a lot of aspects to look at this game, not only for just an NFL perspective, with Justin Fields being, I guess his draft stock really rising with last game, but also some defensive pieces on both teams. I'll be interested because hopefully it's the last game Devontae Smith plays before he's a New York Giant. But besides that, it's going to be probably the best talent in college football in terms of Alabama and Ohio State, which is a perennial, as I mentioned, powerhouse, beating Clemson. And I think these two teams, even though Ohio State only played 7 games and are 7-0 and Bama 12-0, these were the two best teams in college football this year, even though Ohio State got off to a rough start. And Bama throughout has been the number 1 team in college football. If you look at their last games, which I know we went over last week, but just to rehash it, Bama, a 31-14 win over Notre Dame, 4 touchdowns, 296 yards for Mac Jones, and Devontae Smith, who is now the Heisman Trophy winner, 7 catches for 133 touchdowns, an unbelievable game for him that didn't even factor into his Heisman candidacy, but was an amazing game on a national stage. And then you look at Ohio State, they beat Clemson 49-28, had 35 points at halftime, and Justin Fields had 385 yards, 6 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. And Trey Sermon was preaching all over the place with 193 yards and a touchdown. So both those teams really just dominated. And I know, we joked last week that, hey, Notre Dame covered, so good teams win, but great teams covered. But that game between Bama and Notre Dame was really over by the first quarter's end. And now in terms of this game, looking at it, I think there's really only one big storyline. People will throw out to you that there's a lot of aspects to this game, and there are to every football game. But the one key component to this game is just Justin Fields, in my opinion. He has to play like he did versus Clemson. Worldly. An amazing game. He has been inconsistent this year, especially in the Big Ten Championship, did not look like a great quarterback, and then looked like he was better than Lawrence when he played his team versus Clemson. That's all this game predicates on, because Bama's going to score their points. They're just too good not to, even if they get off to a slow start, even if they make turnovers early in the game. They are a talented offense, and their defense, actually, for the first time in forever, even though it is immensely talented, is probably the weaker of the two units, which is never the case for an SEC team, but is this year. So this has to be, in my opinion, 1, Justin Fields' game, and 2, a track meet. The over-under on this game is 75.5, and that number doesn't look like it's going to be hard to reach. Ohio State needs to come out and outscore Alabama, and that's the simple thing of it. It has to be a track meet. It has to be a game where maybe 1 or 2 turnovers or a big mistake is the factor, and there aren't, That's it. And maybe the team that gets the ball last will be the team that wins. That's the kind of game Ohio State has to play, because if they don't, I think Bama will have an easy time with Ohio State. And again, it's all the fields. And you don't like to, maybe it's basic analysis, putting all the pressure and the importance on one player, and especially that being the quarterback. But Justin Fields has to come out and play a great game. You look at Ohio State's, and I know it's a shorter season, but you look at their previous 7 games. They get off to slow starts. Fields not playing well. He throws an interception. It affects the defense as well. And you can't make a mistake, even though Fields is pretty much guaranteed an interception a game versus this Alabama team. They're going to beat you. So Fields needs to play a perfect game. And the reason I'm saying this is because he did that versus Clemson. He did. That was a perfect game by every measure you could look at it. It was an amazing performance. And could it be replicated versus Alabama? That's remained to be seen, but I think that's the key to this game. Maybe, Brennan, you have a different perspective. Maybe you think Bama's special teams are really going to be the difference in this one. I don't know, but definitely want to get your guys' thoughts, and then after that, we'll give our predictions in this game. It's an 8.5-point spread. Alabama's the favorite, but again, I think maybe a close game, especially if Justin Fields plays well.
Now, John, you know that I'm a special teams guy,
Yeah.
And I do believe special teams can win you games on its own, but I don't think it's going to be the special teams that make the difference. I think it's going to be the fact that Alabama is superior at almost every position that's going to make the difference. Let's just take a look at the awards that Alabama has already won this year. Mac Jones, best quarterback in college football. Alex Leatherwood, best interior lineman in college football. He won the Outland Trophy. Devonta Smith, the best wide receiver in college football, winning the Biletnikoff. Landon Dickerson, the best center in college football, won the Remington. Let's see, Walter Camp Player of the Year. That goes to Devonta Smith as well. Najee Harris won the best running back in college football, the Doak Walker Award. Devonta Smith won the Maxwell Award for being the most outstanding player in college football. Let's see. So that's the center, the interior lineman, the running back, the quarterback, and the wide receiver. Number ones have all won awards for being the best at their position. And then, hey, why not to throw it on there? The Patrick Manley Award for the best long snapper in college football as well. So really, the special teams are going to play a factor. Obviously, best long snapper in college football. And then, of course, we can't forget to mention the Heisman Trophy going to Devonta Smith as well. They're better on the offensive side of the ball than not just Ohio State, but better than every single team that is playing Division I college football this season. Alabama is just vastly superior on the offensive side of the ball. It doesn't really matter what the defense can do when your offense can score pretty much at will. I get it. The Big Ten is a defensive conference. They play a lot of games that are low scoring. It's not going to be this game. The over-under started at 76. I'm not sure what it's at now. I'm not going to speculate where the number has gone, but it's the highest opening for a national championship game in the history of national championship games. The game is going to be high scoring, and the team with the better offense is going to win, and the team with the better offense is Alabama.
Yeah, I think it's smart to say that tomorrow Alabama will win the best team in college football award by beating Ohio State tomorrow night. I think that's definitely the smart thing to say. You know, Ohio State, it was such an odd year for them, especially really not playing that many games. Dabo Swinney didn't think they were that good. We all remember that, and he definitely had to eat his words on that one. And now, you know, they're going to have to play Alabama, which is going to be very, very difficult for them to win. And not just them, really any team in the league. You mentioned how great they are, all the awards they've won. It's definitely for a reason. This is an Alabama team I feel like we've seen, not the specific one, but many times in the past, the team that is really, really good and probably a lot better than every other team in college football.
So those are our thoughts. And just to get my pick in, because pretty much Brennan and Dan sort of said who they're going to go with, I'm going to pick Bama too. I think it may be closer than maybe people think, but I still think it's going to be a 2-possession game. Bama is just that much better. And I gave out the formula to what I think Ohio State has to do. And does Justin Fields have another game like he played against Clemson in him? That's remained to be seen, and hopefully for Ohio State fans, that's the case for Justin Fields. But if not, it will be an Alabama national championship and the 7th all-time for Nick Saban as a head coach. So, again, a lot of interesting storylines, but those are our thoughts on the college football playoff national championship. And again, final thing on this, it's a good job, I guess, all around that we got to this point in the college football season, because at times it didn't look likely, but it is happening, and that will be tomorrow, maybe when you rewatch this today. But on Monday, January 10th or 11th, 2021 on ESPN. Now we'll shift into a season preview for the National Hockey League, and I think this is the best place to put it because the NHL begins on Wednesday. And unlike any other season, this one has a lot of just uniqueness in terms of the National Hockey League. And it's not just COVID. Obviously, the rule changes that I'm going to list and give you are because of COVID, but not only that, and the COVID protocols and coaches having to wear masks on the bench and different things like that, but there's a new offsides rule because it's been talked about for a while, these players that will skate over the blue line and try and keep 1 foot on the blue line, and then it being looked at in review and it's slowing down the game. And it was calculated that with reverses, when there were goals scored, but they said they were offside, 14 goals in total last season were taken off the board. So hockey, wanting to be more offensive and really just, I guess, cater to their fans, have changed the offside rule where it looks like pretty much you have to keep a foot on the blue line, but that, reaching extension, there won't be really, there won't be really any litigation on it, I should say. And in terms of looking at it, it won't be, I guess, as heavily scrutiny reviewed, and not more goals will pass because it's still, adhering to the rule, but the rule is created to add more offense to the National Hockey League. It'll be a 56-game season, and there's a division realignment, which I like and I hate in the same respect. I like it because the Rangers are playing the teams that you want to see them play. The Islanders, the Devils, the Bruins, the Capitals, the Penguins, and I'm probably forgetting one. That's what happens when you list all of them, the Devils and the Flyers. Those are the teams that the Rangers I want to see play every game in the season, and I get that this year. I know some people like to watch teams in the Western Conference and get a taste for the entire NHL, and I do too. I love Rangers hockey no matter what. Who they're going to play, I'm going to watch. But I prefer to watch Rangers Devils and Rangers Islanders more than seeing the Coyotes once a year. That's just my opinion. That's just what I want to see. And I think it helps foster real rivalries because I think the last couple of years, less so in hockey than any other sport, because I think rivalries in the NBA just pretty much are predicated on when good players go and there's not really team history. This year in the NHL, the team history that's already there is going to be amplified. The Rangers seeing the Islanders a lot are going to add to better games and hopefully maybe a playoff series between the two. And the fact that they're only playing in the East, I think, will add to better hockey. Less travel, even though they are playing in their arenas and will travel. They're not going to the West Coast. They're not going to the Midwest. There's not that 10-game West Coast trip. So I think it'll be better hockey, and hockey that I know doesn't mean more, but it just feels like it means more with this schedule change. One thing I hated, and Brennan and I talked about at the top of the show, or I should say in our pre-production meeting, the NHL renaming the divisions is beyond stupid. Now, is it a thing that I think is going to carry over to seasons in the future? No. They lost a lot of revenue because of COVID last season. They're trying to remake some of that. And are we on this show and any other show that talks hockey going to say, oh, in the Scots or whatever the East Division, I think it's Scots, in the Scots East Division, I'm picking the Rangers. No one's going to do that. I think it's a dumb move in terms of just how it looks. Because I always rip the or not always, but I rip the MLB for having the Nike logo on the jersey. I rip the NBA for having a sponsor on the jersey. Well, the NHL's doing sort of the same with, we're naming the divisions. But luckily, as I said, it's temporarily and hopefully for 1 year. But again, it's just a money grab and a money move. I despise it, and I'm going to despise it every time I see the TV or radio broadcast mention the sponsor or the graphic, but hey, it is what it is. Another new addition is 6 players on a taxi squad, which I think is a huge is a great decision by the NHL. One, it gets a chance to see the prospect pool for these teams and the top prospects because they're the ones that are going to be in the taxi squad. There is the AHL season going to start, which is equivalent to AAA for hockey and is affiliated with these teams, but the best players or the ones that may contribute will be in this taxi squad, and undoubtedly there's going to be, you hope not, but undoubtedly there's going to be COVID cases, so, having a taxi squad there and not having to travel from the AHL affiliate is huge. They have them right there, and they're practicing with the team, and the culture is built that way. We always talk about on this show how you want the younger players to be with the older ones in terms of building a culture. I mentioned that Jeter being with the 95 Yankees helped the Yankees dynasty, even though he wasn't a playing part of it in the postseason. I talked about why I want the Giants to make the playoffs, because it builds a better culture, even though they probably would have lost to Tampa last night. But with the NHL doing this taxi squad move, I think it does the same exact thing. It helps build a culture, and these guys who, and this is no shot for the Rangers at the Hartford Wolfpack's culture, but being with the NHL organization is different than being with the AHL organization and only pay dividends for the future. I'm excited, as I always am, for the hockey season, and it's going to be unique, and 56 games feels more like a sprint. Not that 82 feels like a marathon, but each game is going to feel that more important. And especially, as I mentioned at the top, the fact it's going to be against division opponents, to me, is going to make it feel like it means more. Brennan, your thoughts, and Dan, if you want to add, I know you're wearing, baseball and football stuff, no hockey stuff on right now, but Brennan, your thoughts on this NHL season, what you're looking forward to. You want to rip the sponsor names? I don't know.
Yeah, another point that you didn't, I don't think you forgot, but I just forgot to mention is the fact that sponsors are going to be on the side of the players' helmets as well.
Yeah.
Yep. To raise a little bit more money. I don't hate it. I really don't. Like you said, no one's going to refer to the divisions as the Mass Mutual West or the Scots Lawn Care East. So
there we go. I got it, Scots.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's fine. They're making their money. The naming the divisions thing won't stick around. And I think the logos on the side of the helmets will. But I think that as long as they don't start, putting sponsors on jerseys or going to the European style of just making the front of your jersey look like the side of a NASCAR, where it's like logo, and then the logo of the team is like only like in the top left corner. As long as they don't do that, I'm fine with it. The thing that I think I can speak on the best is the taxi squad, strictly because living where I live in the middle of, for lack of a better term, bum blank nowhere, in central New York, I only have one team that I actually have a hometown rooting interest in, and that's the AHL's Utica Comets. The Utica Comets are the AHL affiliate of the Vancouver Canucks. And if you don't know much about geography, upstate New York is nowhere near Vancouver in Canada. Vancouver is the sister city of Seattle. If you don't know where that is, then I can't help you. But they send their players from upstate New York to Vancouver when they want to call guys up, call guys down. And that just doesn't make a lot of sense. I love the team. I love the Comets. I love the Canucks, just simply because a lot of the guys that are on the Canucks right now are guys that I have grown up watching play in Utica. But it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I love the taxi squad concept. What doesn't mean I'm not going to be able to see some of my favorite Comets players, Zach McEwen, Justin Bailey. Yes, it does. They're going to be on that taxi squad. They're not going to be able to come down to the Comets strictly because of the rules due to COVID, going from the U.S. to Canada, Canada to the U.S. There's some pretty strict rules that give us that Canadian division that I know a lot of people are excited for in the NHL. There's also one in the AHL as well. I think it's only 3 or 4 teams. The AHL divisions are weird. If you want to see something weird, go take a look at the AHL division realignment. But it'll be interesting. It'll be real interesting. There are also a few AHL teams that are taking 2 NHL teams' prospect pools, including the Comets, who are going to be the official affiliate this season of the Vancouver Canucks and also the St. Louis Blues. The other 2 teams doing that are the Syracuse Crunch and the Chicago Wolves, who will be taking 2 teams. I don't know who the other teams are that they are taking. I know that the Crunch are usually for the Lightning. I believe they're also taking the Wilds team. I'm not sure who the Wolves are taking either, but it'll be interesting. I think that the season is going to be a fun one, but I'm not sure, how many people are actually going to sit there and be like, yeah, this is what it'll be. Essentially the same thing as the MLB season was. People are going to sit there and go, yeah, it's an abbreviated season. The stats, while they're going to count a little bit, they're not going to be the biggest thing that you look at this year as far as determining who the best players were and who's going to work as far as salary cap and giving guys money in the off season. I think the biggest thing this season is going to be the fact that we're going to watch Zdeno Chara in a Washington Capitals uniform as opposed to his usual Boston Bruins uniform. But it'll be a fun season.
So again, not really a big follower of hockey. But as you guys were talking about this, I was on Twitter and I saw that Deadspin has an article that is titled "Hockey is Blanked," and it has some very negative opinions of the upcoming season. And they're talking about all the virus stuff and all the protocol, and it doesn't really seem very relevant to me. But it seems very negative. And also ads on jerseys, lame. Dumb. Yeah. You want to put ads on? It's like in the NBA, you put the GE logo on the Celtic jersey. Larry Bird used to wear that. You're going to put that on there, stuff like that. That's just really lame to me.
Yeah, I always think it diminishes history, and I didn't have a problem with the NBA doing it because not so much I don't respect the NBA's history, but it's not as long as baseball, as hockey, and football is a little longer than the NBA, but the NBA has the shortest history, so I could, in my opinion, I could care, I guess, the least about it, but. Dan brings up a great point, of course. Squarespace on the Knicks uniform, I don't know. It doesn't do anything for me, sorry. But there you go. Those are our thoughts on the NHL season. And I think the proper preview was just laying all this out because, as Brennan mentioned with the helmets, I even forgot that. There's so much new with the NHL, which hopefully for it is a reason that viewers tune in. But, again, definitely a lot of interesting components. One final thing, the North Division is consistent of entirely Canadian teams, so that means 4 Canadian teams are guaranteed a playoff spot, which is something you don't see every year, and so good for them, I guess. And they need a little something since the United States World Juniors beat Canada in the gold medal game this past week. Just want to get that in as well. Big win, and more importantly, a big loss for Canada. All right, so now we'll shift into our MVP of the week, and this is a great segment in which we look at someone or something that had a great week, and it could span from sports, entertainment, pop culture, news, anything, and anyone who we thought had a great week that is worth, or is noteworthy, I should say. And I'm going to start with the obvious MVP of the week, and it's someone who was in the news recently, and his name is Taylor Heinicke. And he's the man, because last night with the Washington football team, after for the most part this week, preparing like a backup. Alex Smith was expected to start, even though there was questions around it. Heinicke came in and played a playoff game. He was a backup in the XFL last year. He played a playoff game against the Buccaneers and Tom Brady on the other side. And you didn't even really get a chance in my mind to see if he could lead a drive down the field because of a bad call in which a fumble that went out of bounds was ruled incomplete, and Heinicke took a sack, and Washington faltered to the Buccaneers by 8 points. But Heinicke had a great game, an amazing game. 26 for 44, and half of those 18 incompletions pretty much were drops from the Washington football team, his receivers and tight ends did not bail him out once on any throw. And if anything, as I mentioned, Heinicke should have had more completions. His completion percentage should have been better. Besides that, though, 306 yards, a touchdown, and a pick, and then 6 rushes for 46 yards and a touchdown. And an interesting stat, too, Heinicke threw for 306 yards in a playoff game, and 300 yards, a good game. 300 yards is something that Daniel Jones, the Giants quarterback this season, did not do once. And Taylor Heinicke against the Buccaneers in a playoff game where the Buccaneers defense was focused in, threw for 306 yards. Not ideal. Not great. I wanted to get that stat in, but the MVP of the week is Taylor Heinicke. The fact that he went from relatively obscurity to being this close to knocking off Brady and joining the list of quarterbacks to beat Tom Brady in a playoff game was awesome. People were joking on Twitter last night that it was, the starts to a movie and Disney scriptwriters were eagerly watching this game. But jokes aside, Heinicke, MVP of the week, great performance in a losing effort.
Yeah, he was in consideration for mine as well. But it plays a little bit into recency bias, so I'm going to do another thing that plays into recency bias quite a bit and say that mine is Marek Dolezaj. He's a forward on the Syracuse basketball team, and yesterday he created an entire brand of merch strictly based on the fact that late in the game, in Syracuse's game against Georgetown, he got his front tooth knocked out. There's a picture of him with a big toothy grin bleeding from his mouth with just like one front tooth just absolutely missing. It's a great picture. It's going to sell Syracuse a lot of T-shirts, and I think that a picture's worth 1,000 words as far as that goes. So my MVP of the week Merrick Dolezaj, Syracuse basketball team. They took down a Big East opponent yesterday in Georgetown.
One thing, Dan, before you jump in, Brennan, was that Syracuse putting out the T-shirt or him, the player?
Oh no, I'm saying it will be a great merchandise line for some bootlegging Syracuse students.
Okay. All right, yeah. Because I was about to say,
in their apostrophe CK Cortland T-shirts, like they're not put out by the school, but someone's making a lot of money off.
Yeah. Okay. I thought he put out one because I was about to say isn't that NCAA violations, but no, that makes more sense. I will not be purchasing that shirt. But yeah, Dan, MVP of the week.
So my MVP this week is definitely the Bills fan that got thrown through this flaming table. You want to talk about value? This guy not only wanted to get thrown through a table, but it was on fire. He put his body on the line. They had to put him out in the snow right there. People, do not try this, okay? You're going to get hurt. Don't let anyone throw you through a table in general. I'm sure all of them weren't quarantining together as well. So please keep your distance. That's a really bad idea. I'm going to talk very quickly about I don't know about my anti-MVP this week, but just someone who was in the news who, I forgot to bring this up last week. This week was Dan Le Batard's final show on ESPN. He's gone now. He's been on Apple Podcasts for a while. And I just found the tweet on December 29th. He put out a video explaining that his father, Gonzalo Le Batard, is not his dad. That is a paid actor. His name is Doug from Des Moines, Iowa, who played his father on the show for many years in the show's history. And then he goes on his new show off ESPN this week and keeps the joke alive. He called into the show and acted like he was still his father after explaining to people that that's an accent that's not actually his dad. So I don't know whether to give him the MVP or not, but isn't that a shocking story for ESPN's #1 show? For him to have that joke running for 10 plus years, joke running for 10 plus years, isn't that wild?
I thought it was a joke that he was the guy from Des Moines. I thought that was the joke, and he is his real dad. Is that not his real dad?
It seems to me. The crazy part is
no.
To tell.
Who knows at this point?
Well, because I read the same thing, but I thought that it was like Dan Le Batard because he was going to address why he was leaving ESPN, so he put out this soppy video. But it was a joke, just saying his dad's some paid actor. If that's real, no.
That's why I brought this up, because it's hard to tell. He would try something like this. He really would do something like this. It seems like the video he put out's really serious, and his dad is like really candid in his response. And even I listened to it one day because I wanted to hear it. Field Yates and someone else was filling in for those guys, and they mentioned on air that they're like, yeah, a bunch of people around ESPN knew that this was going on, and he came out and addressed it, and we're going to move on. They didn't spend any time on it. But those guys acted like it was, which led me to believe that he is a paid actor. But it's a really hard story to follow. And if you look for an article on it, it's hard to find anything.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Wow, that is nuts. Because I heard a little about because there's a lot of the Le Batard story in terms of why he's leaving ESPN and this and that. There's a lot of interesting components to it. But I thought that was just a curveball to like alleviate the situation. If that's real, that's crazy. Because one, it speaks to just how like I guess like innocent we are, but just like, yeah, we believe it. Like there was no reason not to believe that was not his father, like I don't know, like I don't want to say they look similar, but they don't not look similar. Like I don't know. That's crazy. And now I'll be reevaluating things during the 1:00 game today and heavily researching this instead of just relaxing. But those are our MVPs of the week. Dan easily the top dog for this segment because that was something. That was something. Good old Doug from Des Moines, Iowa, and that was the funny thing. That's why I thought it was a joke too, because there's like from Iowa, like that's just a random state that like if you were to say where's Poppy from, not that's probably 50 out of the 50 states in this country. So there you go, MVP of the week. Before we move into our NFL Wildcard Sunday game picks. Brennan, are there any actives, inactives around the National Football League that we need to know of? I know this might be a 15-second segment because there aren't a lot of games today, but anything that's coming across the timeline that we might know of?
As far as big things happening, the NFL Live crew all picked the New Orleans Saints, so that bodes well for the Chicago Bears. Yeah.
Wow, okay, there you go. And now you'll get our picks, which are, I guess not as great, but, I guess the same thing as NFL Live if now Brennan has some conviction on the Bears because they all picked the Saints, right? We're not going to do our lock upset game of the week picks because there's only really 3. And the winner of that, or winner of our pick segment, was Brennan Miller. He fended off Dan late in week 17, and I was 11 points back. So it was close for the last couple weeks, but Brennan is the champion. We don't have a title belt or a crown to give him, but he is the picks champion, and a great year all around in terms of picks. I think hopefully maybe money was made from you guys watching. Probably not, but I would like to think that. But in terms of today and our NFL picks, we'll start in chronological order, and we'll start with the Ravens and the Titans. Dan, it's your first game to start and give your thoughts on it. You're going to be interested in both this and Sunday Night Football tonight because it will determine who the Buffalo Bills will play next week. But we have Ravens-Titans first up. Who is your pick for this game which is a rematch from last year's playoffs?
So I picked this game is the Titans. As I look across here, I think I may be in agreement with a few other people on this show. The Titans won their division with 11-5. Ravens also went 11-5 this year, but the Steelers took their division. As far as the Buffalo spin is concerned, they will play the highest remaining seed because they're the number 2 seed. That will most likely be Pittsburgh because the Browns haven't practiced all week. We'll get to that later. But anyway, for this game, I do think the Titans are the better team. I think Derrick Henry is just too hard to stop. The Ravens, again, are a solid team, but when it comes to the playoffs, I don't think that I trust them yet. I don't know how you guys feel about them, but I'm not ready to take them against the Titans, who were able to knock off Tom Brady last year. I think that they are more ready for this moment, and I think they're a better team.
Brian, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at the Ravens-Titans game. I think, is it a surprise that we've all picked the Titans? Maybe a little bit. I think that looking at the Ravens as, the favorites going in, you'd assume that one of us would pick them. But I just like the Titans running game. I understand that the Ravens are a team that, as of the last few weeks, has gotten hot, but they also kind of played a cookie cutter schedule at the end of the year. Titans are a team that, especially late in the season, if you give Derrick Henry the ball, he's going to be able to run the ball very, very effectively. I mean, even in their loss last week, he still ran for over 200 yards to clip 2,000 yards on the season. He's dangerous, very dangerous. You give him the ball in his hands, and he's going to do something with it. I think that plays a huge factor in this game. The Ravens of this year are not the same Ravens as last year. We saw the Titans go and beat them in the playoffs last year in the divisional round. I think the same thing happens again this season. I like the Titans in this one.
Yeah, and so do I. I think that Tennessee, as Brennan and Dan mentioned, the run game is going to be too much. And it's interesting because I mentioned that last year was the same matchup, Ravens versus Titans, and to the Ravens fans' shock, it was a Titans victory and an upset, and they would later have a run, but just fall short of making the Super Bowl. But I don't think the Titans have that roster this year, but I think they're better than the Ravens. And the formula is this. Both teams are run-heavy in terms of their offensive scheme. But believe it or not, I think the better quarterback and play-action scenarios and the better game plan against the defense will be the Tennessee Titans. I understand Lamar Jackson could do more than Ryan Tannehill. He could run. He could, at a very high rate. He can pass, even though, people like to knock his passing abilities. He does have great accuracy. Deep ball's not there, but great accuracy. And the Ravens really, when their offense is going, is just run, pass, and a well-balanced offense. But I think the kings of the balanced offense are the Tennessee Titans, and just because Derrick Henry and the offensive line are just so physical up front. And I think it will be deja vu all over again in terms of this game where Tennessee just outruns and outplays in the trenches the Baltimore Ravens defense, the Titans offensive line that being, and Tennessee ekes out a win. I think it will be close. I think the spread is Baltimore -3 for a reason, and that's because people are expecting a close game. And I'm picking the Titans, and as Brennan mentioned, I'm surprised we all have this team just because of the Ravens being the favorite, but we're all in the camp of the Tennessee Titans beating the Ravens. I think out of the 3 that this will be the best playoff game, but hopefully each one gets better as the day goes on, which would be great for viewing. But I think this one is going to be the best in terms of game quality. I think the Sunday Night Football game is the one with the biggest storylines, but the one we'll go to next is the one I think no one wants to see. They're putting it on Nickelodeon, for goodness sakes. You got the New Orleans Saints against the Chicago Bears. And not only on Nickelodeon, there's about 10, I counted them, 10 to 12, it depends, announcer booths that you could watch with this game. You could watch it on regular CBS. You could watch it on Nickelodeon. You could watch it on Spanish radio, Spanish TV. You could watch it on, Amazon is doing the package as well. National radio, both local radio. It's crazy. And that's the same thing for the Ravens Titans. A lot of ways you could watch it, but if you go and find all the ways you can watch this game, there are more than not, pretty much, and you really can't escape this game. I don't know if I'll be tuning into Nickelodeon. I don't know what you guys, maybe they'll all be our MVP of the week. I think you got to give it a try. It'll be Noah Eagle on the call, who's the son of Ian Eagle, alongside Nate Burleson, and then 2 kid actors on Nickelodeon, which I'm sure are going to provide some great analysis. But no, just kidding. They're kids. They're going to be awesome. And if I don't see Squidward once, I'm gonna riot. But anyway, in terms of Saints versus Bears, I think you all know where we're going with this. Even though the NFL Live crew picked the Saints as well, maybe we should stay away. The Saints are just too powerful. The Bears have been really inconsistent all year. Mitchell Trubisky in big games, which haven't been a lot in his career, but the ones that have been there for him, he's underperformed. He seems to be getting a stride late in the season, but a couple weeks ago, he wasn't even the starter for Chicago. I think the Saints in the Dome at home are just going to be too much, and they are going to beat Chicago. The spread's 10. Not going to give you my decision on that. Maybe it's too big of a number, but the Saints victory, I could almost guarantee, and I'm picking them. Dan, Saints versus Bears, I know where you're going.
Yeah, I got the Saints in this one because the Bears are good, then they're bad, then they're good, and now they're on Nickelodeon. So it's just a sign that rather than watching, folks, you should research who Gonzalo Levitard is. Like I said, listen to the episode where Field Yates talks about it. It's very, very interesting.
Or rewatch the show,
anyway, yeah, it's the one right after you announced it. Anyway, this game is just, do something better with your time. I don't care how much Drew Brees' arm has fall off. He could probably beat him with his left arm, to be honest with you. So I'm going to take the Saints in this one.
Yeah, Bears to cover.
Nice.
The reasoning, take that as you will, but
Yeah,
I got the Bears.
You don't
Bears
need
plus 10.
Yeah, you don't need reasoning, Brendan. Do you want to lead us to our final game?
Listen. If you're watching the show, you know why. Okay.
Yeah.
Bears to cover plus 10.
You just know. Do you want to lead our final game? Sunday Night Football, pretty much. Browns versus Steelers. It could also be a playoff drought for Cleveland that's coming to an end. Maybe like Buffalo. Maybe it's a weekend where playoff droughts go to die. But I don't think we are in agreement that's going to happen. Brennan, Browns versus Steelers on Sunday Night Football that caps off the Super Wildcard weekend.
Browns versus Steelers. For a while, the Steelers were looking like they were going to be the number 1 seed in the AFC. They're not. They have to play this weekend. They're the number 3 seed. That being said, they have to play a divisional rival in the Cleveland Browns. The Browns at this point are playing their second team. They have their second team coach coaching the team, as Brian Stefanski will be watching the game from his basement with all the lights turned off with a beer in his hand, cowering in fear as the Pittsburgh Steelers are able to win this game. I think that, are the Steelers a team that's going to be able to compete for a Super Bowl? No. Are they a team that's going to beat the Cleveland Browns in a weakened Cleveland Browns team in the first round of the NFL playoffs? Yes. I think the Steelers win. I have them to win on my ticket, so I have enough confidence in that to be able to say I'll risk some money on it. I like the Steelers in this game.
Yeah, I definitely like the Steelers as well. I mean, for no other reason than because the Browns haven't practiced all week, really. They're really not as prepared for a playoff game. I mean, the NFL really needs to do a better job helping them out with that. They'll move a game to Wednesday night to help Lamar Jackson, but they won't move a playoff game for Cleveland. I think that's really terrible, and I feel bad for the fan base. They finally get here, and they're not really that prepared. I think the Steelers are win. I know people have said they're not very good. I'll believe they're not contenders when they are eliminated. I still think they're going to win today, and that they will have to play the Bills coming up next week.
Yeah, even though it might be an end to the Baker Mayfield progressive commercials if the Browns lose, which I don't want to see, I think Cleveland will take the L tonight versus Pittsburgh. Look, you saw last week in a Pittsburgh team that was pretty much with most of its backups that Cleveland needed a valiant effort just to escape them. So I think when it matters most, and even though I, again, like Brennan, do not believe that Pittsburgh is a real contender this year, they will do enough to get by Cleveland in what I think, again, is going to be a very close game. Really, the meat of this 3-game sandwich is what's going to, I think, not be great, but the both buns on the beginning and the end are going to be pretty good games for NFL Super Wildcard Weekend Sunday. There you go, Wildcard Sunday. So there you go. I think this was a fun show. Dan, keep reveling in the Bills win because it is there for the first time in your lifetime, a Bills victory. Great show all around, and hopefully a lot of great football for this Sunday. For Dan Passante and Brennan Miller, I'm John Vicari. Enjoy. This is my final try at it. NFL Super Wild Card Sunday. This has been the MVP Show.